Okay, those are just some of the more visual features. Germanium, the whole API has actually many other features, but I'll leave you to find them out either through our website or through the API reference. Okay. So the last section I'd like to talk about is just to give you a better picture of the field of web development. Also applies to mobile development. So if you're developing Android apps or iPhone apps, some parts of this will also apply. Okay, so this is just to give you a picture so that if you don't already know this stuff and you are intending to write a web app for CXA, it gives you a head start to know what you need to read up on. Okay, so first let's take a look at a picture of web development. Okay, remember this picture from earlier, right? So this is a picture of the Germanium world. Okay, it's only talking about the Germanium related stuff. Okay, this is a picture of the web development world. Okay, this lists down all the typical stuff that you will see in a web environment. Okay, you won't necessarily have all of them in one environment. Okay, it really depends on the specific app that you're developing. If you are developing a very simple app, for example, you probably can just throw away all the server components and you just develop everything just on your own notebook. Okay. But just in case you are developing a web application, a full web application, let me go through all of this. So let's start with the stuff that's on your own machine, right? Okay, so you guys have some modern browser, i.e. Firefox, Chrome Opera, hopefully not IE6. Okay, browser plugins. Okay, pretty much everyone has Flash. Most people have Java also. Some people have Silverlight, and of course, if you're here today, you have GermaniumWeb installed. And at runtime, when you visit a website, okay, even the code samples you went just now, what happened was the API, the JavaScript API, was downloaded from our API servers to the client machine, okay, and the API was actually running on your machine, okay, which is why it's called a client-side script, okay, and because it's running on your machine, that's why it can actually control the plugin, okay. So for client-side scripts, they are usually written in the Visual Basic script, or more commonly, they are written in JavaScript. And there are also a lot of helper libraries like jQuery, MooTools, and the Yahoo User Interface Framework. Okay, so these libraries actually automate some tasks, like, for example, the ability to show and hide these sections. Okay, some of the buttons, some of these tabs, they're actually provided by these libraries. So you don't actually have to code this behavior yourself. I can just use these libraries instead. Okay, so this is the stuff that's running on your machine. Okay, on the server side, the server side, there can be many different ways that this is configured. Okay, so I'll just say that the web server, what you usually see when you visit one website, let's say conveno.com, okay, or germanium3d.com, is there's usually a web server, there's usually an application server, and there's usually a database. Okay. And there are many different types of software packages to implement these various parts of your website. Okay, the one I'd like to point out is for this competition, right? You guys know that JBoss is another technology provider for this competition, right? So JBoss is up here. Okay, so if you use JBoss for a competition, you use it to implement your server end. Okay. It has an application server, a web server, it can be integrated with databases. Basically, it does everything up here, as long as you're comfortable with a Java environment. Okay. Besides JBoss, there are other software packages like Apache for web servers, IIS, and the databases, there's MySQL and Microsoft SQL. Okay. So this is for the server itself. Okay. Besides your website's own data, in its own database, you can also pull data from elsewhere. So for example, if you are developing your own application and using our office building, you can actually pull the office building from our germanium3d.com server. Okay, so this is just a simple static file. Okay, instead of static files, you can also have more intelligent feeds where you can actually ask for information. So Project Nimbus is another technology provider. Okay, so they are providing data like from hungrygoware.com, show nearby, the ATMs, events, NEA events also, I think some weather information. So your application can actually pull this data from their data servers, okay, and you can use it in your application. Okay, now which components up here you need, right, really depends on your user. So I won't go into any specific details, but instead what I will cover are the common operations that a web application will need to do. Okay. So when you're entering web development, okay, so the first thing you need is you need to be able to set up your server environment. Okay. After that, your runtime application probably needs to do some generic operations, common to all applications. Okay. We'll cover that in detail. And lastly, more specific for Germanium is I'll talk a bit about how you can model your own building, okay, if you don't want to use the 4 buildings that are provided, and how you can deploy it to your web server. Okay. So the first step, okay, this one is more to those of you who don't already have a server environment, right? If you have your own, you can just completely ignore this. Okay. If you want to set up a web server environment, the 3 most common components that you need is the web server itself. You probably need a database, store any user information, and you probably need some scripting language. Okay. So if you don't have any of this yet, okay, what we recommend is getting this free software. Okay, very commonly used for a web server using Apache, for a database using MySQL, and for scripting language using PHP. Okay. Now these 3 free software, they are used so frequently together that some other third-party people, have taken the 3 of them and packaged them together in what is called as AMP stacks, okay, after their acronym. Okay, so for example, there is Windows AMP, WAMP, Linux AMP, cross-platform AMP, which also has Perl, which also supports Perl. Okay, so if you go to wamserver.com, for example, you grab their installer, okay, you run the installer. What it does is it sets up these 3 for you automatically, configures them to work together, and sets all the default settings, which are most likely what you need. Okay. Now, even if you don't think you need a database and you don't need a server-side scripting language, we still recommend that you install it anyway, okay, because there's actually no overheads. They're actually not running. You can just turn them on when you need them, if you discover you do need them later. Okay. And also for CXA, there's another option, that's the one I mentioned, and instead of using a web AMP stack, you can just use JBoss, okay, and it will handle all your server-side stuff for you. Okay, now coming to common web operations. So, okay, why I'm bringing this up is, if you don't already know how to do these operations, I strongly suggest that you go read up, learn how to do this, because for any web app that you develop or mobile app, even if it's not a Germanium app, okay, you're very likely to have to solve some of these tasks. Okay. So the first one, of course, is to be able to store local state. Okay. So if you want your application to remember what the user was doing, so that next time it comes in, it continues from where he stopped. For example, you want to remember where the eye was. When it comes back to the app, he's in the same place. Okay, you got to store it somewhere, and usually this is done by storing in cookies if you're storing on the client machine. Okay. The other option is to actually store it on the server side. Okay. And this actually allows you to do many user-specific operations. Okay, what I mean by user-specific operations is, you take Gmail, for example. Okay. Gmail is 100% user-specific. What I mean is, if you don't have a Gmail account, you can't use Gmail at all, right? You just see the login page and that's it. Okay. So once you log in, everything then you see, your mailbox, everything is all specific to you. Okay. So all of this is powered by what's known as a session running on the server. Okay. So to maintain what the user is currently doing. Okay. Take another example of something which is partially session driven. Take Google Maps, for example. If you don't log in, you can still use Google Maps. You can still look around the map, you can still check out Singapore, everything. But however, if you want to create a map, you want to save your bicycle route and you want to share it with other people, and you want to save this state, then you have to log in, and then you create your Google My Map. Okay? So that part is powered by a session.